What if I told you there are 4 business models that simply never fail because they were designed by God Himself? That the Bible, beyond being a sacred book, holds timeless financial strategies passed down for those who have eyes to see? Then why do so many faithful, hard-working believers still struggle to pay their bills? Because faith without direction is like a ship without a rudder. And in this video, you'll discover the forgotten models, ones that can forever change the way you live, dream, and build. My name is Tamsanqa Mbeki. I'm 47 years old and I was born in Pietermaritzburg, a city surrounded by hills in the heart of South Africa. For over 10 years, I was consumed by the seductive promises of the occult. Pacts, rituals, and ancient symbols offered me control and abundance. But in practice, what I experienced was inner bondage, spiritual oppression, and losses no amount of money could ever compensate. It was in the lowest pit that I found the light, not through fancy words, but through biblical principles most people ignore. When I aligned my faith with action, my life began to shift. What used to be lack turned into provision. Fear became confidence. And today, I understand. True prosperity doesn't come from ambition, but from obedience. Before we continue with this revelation, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this message is reaching and who heaven wants to speak to today. Once you understand that real prosperity is born from obedience, not ambition, an unavoidable question arises. If the Word holds such clear promises, why are so many still trapped in lack? Financial failure among God's children rarely happens because of a lack of faith. More often than not, it stems from spiritual ignorance disguised as devotion. Many are asking God for a miracle when God Himself already gave them a seed, an idea, a talent, even an opportunity. But without the wisdom to recognize and activate what's already in their hands, that seed never sprouts. Some fast, pray, and cry out with passion, yet still find themselves counting coins at the end of the month. Why? Because God doesn't multiply complaints. He multiplies movement. Faith without action is like a map without a compass. You know a treasure exists, but you don't know how to get there. And this has destroyed the financial future of honest, hard-working, God-fearing people. In Hosea 4:6, it is written, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." And that destruction isn't just spiritual, it's emotional, relational, and financial. For years, many were taught that money is dirty, that prospering is worldly, and that seeking financial stability is a distraction from spiritual focus. This distorted mindset robbed Christians of stewardship, strategy, and preparation. Meanwhile, the world's systems continued training their soldiers to dominate, while many children of light remained passive, waiting for something to fall from the sky. But the kingdom of God isn't a system of luck. It's a system of principles. And principles don't change over time, don't bend to emotions, and don't respond to empty religiosity. The truth is hard. If you neglect the foundations God established, you will reap the consequences of that neglect, even if you pray every single day. God never intended for His children to live off scraps. He called you to lead, to multiply, to build, to sustain others. But that only happens when your faith meets discipline, knowledge, and practical direction. Purposeful prosperity doesn't mean having a lot. It means doing a lot with what you've already received. And if until now it felt like something was blocking your finances, maybe what was missing wasn't prayer, but understanding. The good news is that change is starting now. And the first step to breaking this cycle is discovering the business model God revealed in His Word, a model that becomes both a shield during crises and a channel of provision in hard times. When understanding comes, it casts out confusion, and that's when many discover something astonishing. The source of practical wisdom was within reach all along, in the Scriptures. Most Christians read the Bible seeking comfort for the soul, And yes, it comforts, but many fail to realize that beyond comfort it also instructs. God's word is not only spiritual, it's strategic. It's a source of eternal codes that, when activated, bring transformation not just internally, but also in practical life, in business, decisions, and finances. Within the pages of this book lie instructions that many ignore while pleading for help. Ecclesiastes 11 speaks of diversification. Divide your portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on the earth. That's not poetry. It's prophetic intelligence. Proverbs is a manual on management, warning against laziness, praising diligence, and teaching about timing. In Genesis, God gives Abraham land as a sign of blessing and legacy. In Matthew 25, Jesus reveals that multiplication is a sign of faithfulness, and hiding your talent is seen as unfaithfulness. Each of these passages holds a practical truth. God cares about what you do with what He gave you. And more than that, He already showed us how to use it. The difference between those who prosper and those who stay stuck isn't God's love. It's the application of His principles. Many love the Lord, but live under financial pressure simply because they were never taught to think like stewards, only like survivors. The problem is, while the world trains strategists, the religious system raised dependents. Yet the kingdom was never about dependency. It was always about governance with responsibility. Once you understand that the Bible is a map, you stop waiting for someone else to draw the path for you. You take the map, read the coordinates, and move with confidence. For a long time, I looked for shortcuts myself, but none of them brought lasting peace. Only when I began to apply biblical principles with consistency, day after day, did the results start to show. Not overnight, but like a harvest watered faithfully. Because those who sow with wisdom reap with consistency. And that's the kind of prosperity that doesn't rely on the market, on luck, or on the dollar, but on faithfulness to what's already been revealed. Prosperity that flows from faithfulness to biblical principles doesn't depend on economic shifts or human promises. It stands on truths that were established by God long before modern systems existed, and they still work today for those with open spiritual eyes and a willingness to act. Those who live constantly hoping for a financial miracle but refuse to organize their lives end up building their own instability. Relying on a single source of income, no matter how secure it seems, is like building a house on a single pillar. One shake, and it all collapses. Ecclesiastes 11:2 is clear. Divide your portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what misfortune may come upon the earth. That's not just wise advice. It's a prophetic command for protection. Diversifying is not a sign of fear. It's a sign of spiritual intelligence. It's recognizing that in the kingdom, multiplication is born from movement. God doesn't want His children to merely survive. He created us to build, to serve, to expand, to multiply. And yes, that includes finances. Many still believe that diversification is only for those who already have a lot of money. But the truth is the opposite. Those who diversify are the ones with vision, not excess. Having a steady paycheck is not wrong. The problem is thinking that this paycheck is the only way God can provide for you. In times of crisis, someone with only one option panics. But those with multiple paths adapt, reinvent themselves, and keep producing. Today, there are simple and accessible ways to diversify. Offering a service, selling something you make, turning a skill into a digital product, renting out something you already own, or joining a local partnership. It's not about doing 1,000 things at once. It's about building a system where your finances don't rely solely on your physical effort. Because one day, the body will get tired, but what's built with wisdom keeps producing. Jesus made this clear in the parable of the talents. The servant who was afraid buried his talent and waited. The one who made the money work received more. The kingdom does not reward passivity. It honors purposeful diligence. And maybe you're thinking, but I don't have a talent for that. Yes, you do. What seems ordinary to you might be exactly what someone else is missing. The question isn't whether you have something, it's whether you're willing to activate what you already have. Diversifying isn't about accumulation, it's about obedience. When you put your resources, gifts, and time into motion, God does what only He can do. He breathes favor over everything that carries purpose. God's favor doesn't always show up as open doors right away. Sometimes He hands you a key in the form of an idea, a forgotten tool, or a simple opportunity hidden in what most call routine. Sifo lived on the busy streets of Johannesburg, trying to manage bills that never seemed to balance. To many, he was just another driver with a borrowed car and an old phone. But inside, there was something the numbers couldn't show, a quiet willingness to respond to God's voice. One day, after a casual conversation with a local pastor, he was challenged to look at everything he already had, even if it wasn't much, and ask himself, what can I generate from this? Instead of waiting for a new season, he decided to take a step with what was already in his hands. He started offering small delivery services in the neighborhood between rides. Local clients quickly noticed his punctuality and kindness. That alone brought in steady requests. But Sifo saw further. Noticing how often people praised his careful driving, he decided to share that knowledge with others. He recorded his first videos with his cracked phone, sitting in his own car at night after finishing work. He spoke simply about safe driving, emotional control in traffic, and even how to deal with difficult passengers. In no time, he began receiving messages of gratitude and requests for more in-depth content. He didn't hesitate. He created a basic online course with practical tips for new and freelance drivers. Nothing fancy, but full of real-life experience. With the profits from his first sales, he stabilized his finances. And with the earnings that followed, he made a decision that marked a new chapter in his life. He began paying the rent for the building where his church gathered. What started as an attempt became provision. What looked like improvisation became a model. Today, Sifo is no longer a survivor of the system. He's a living example of faithfulness in action. He now has 3 delivery drivers he personally trained, creates content for new drivers, and leads a small Bible-based finance study group in his community. His story is a powerful reminder. It's not about how much you have, but how much you believe God can do through what's already there, waiting to be set in motion. When purpose meets action, even the impossible bows. But there are paths that not only provide for the present, but become inheritance for future generations. Not every business is born to be temporary. Some carry, from the start, a seal of prophetic continuity. Land has never been just a material asset. From the earliest chapters of Scripture, it appears as a symbol of covenant, promise, and destiny. In Genesis 13, 14, 17, God says to Abraham, "Lift up your eyes now and look from the place where you are. All the land that you see I will give to you and your descendants forever." The Lord didn't just hand over physical territory, He sealed an eternal legacy. That principle is still alive today. Property doesn't just represent financial security. When acquired with discernment and consecrated for purpose, it becomes an instrument of stability, multiplication, and spiritual provision. While many spend fortunes on things that lose value, land stands firm, resisting crises, wars, and government changes. It is, literally, a firm foundation. The modern system tries to convince people that investing in land is only for the wealthy, out of reach for most. But the truth is different. There are silent opportunities, often overlooked, just waiting for someone with a discerning eye. Land in growing urban areas, forgotten lots, farming plots, spaces to renovate, or affordable real estate funds. All of these can be seeds of something lasting. I met a man named Noah, a modern farmer from rural Guatemala. For years, he lived in rented homes, paying more than he could afford, always anxious about the next rent hike, but one day he prayed for wisdom. Instead of a miraculous sum of money, God led him to a small, undervalued plot of land. With effort and faith, he bought it and began to care for it. 2 years later, a road was built nearby. The land tripled in value. Today, in addition to housing his family, that land supports a small farming project that generates income and food for the community, and also hosts a cell group from the local church. This is what it's about, not just seeking this month's blessing, but laying the foundation for legacy. Land speaks of roots, permanence, long-term vision. Where there is consecrated ground, there is an expected harvest. Where there is a foundation, God establishes a dwelling. And when the Lord gives territory, He's entrusting more than space. He's releasing destiny. But this revelation has been erased by the system's logic, which keeps repeating that land is a privilege for a few. That mindset not only limits growth, but also keeps many of God's children from accessing what has already been released in the spiritual realm. Behind the stagnation of many dreams lies a mistaken belief. That's not for me. It's what many people say when they think about buying land, investing in property, or starting a fixed project. That's for people with money. But that phrase, as common as it is, didn't come from heaven. It came from fear disguised as realism. God's word never tied the promise to a bank account. It requires faith, vision, and diligence. What seems out of reach today might simply be hidden due to a lack of strategy. There are small lots, undervalued land, fixable properties, or forgotten places, forgotten by everyone except God. They are openings of opportunity waiting for someone who sees through kingdom eyes. The key is to discern the timing and act wisely. Many spend without thinking on trips, expensive gadgets, disposable things. All of that depreciates over time. But a small investment with vision can become a lasting source of provision and peace. While most people wait for leftovers, God's children work with seeds. In practice, there are growing cities, developing areas, regions with local incentives, and even government programs that make access to land easier. But this requires something that impatience cannot offer: research, patience, and positioning. And above all, prayer, because more important than acquiring is consecrating. When a territory is given to God, it stops being just land and becomes an altar. And it's important to remember, it's not about size, it's about purpose. Some have acres and live in emptiness. Others start with a small backyard and turn it into a place of provision, shelter, and transformation. What determines the spiritual value of land is not its measure, but its mission. Those who believe land is only for the rich deny the truth that God is the owner of gold and silver. They deny that He still fulfills promises to those with obedient faith. They deny that inheritance is not about perfect heirs, but about willing hearts. And when you start thinking like a child, you stop asking, "How much does it cost?" and start asking, "What is the purpose of this place in my story?" When you start thinking like a child, you understand that the Father's blessings are not limited to a select few. They are available to those who seek purpose, not just position. And among all the resources God can give someone, there is one that never wears out: knowledge that transforms. There is something inflation can't corrode, no thief can steal, and that multiplies every time it is shared: applied wisdom. In Proverbs 4:7, the instruction is clear: get wisdom, and with all your possessions get understanding. The text doesn't present wisdom as a suggestion, but as a priority. In the kingdom, knowledge is not intellectual accumulation. It's a tool for impact. Everything you've lived through, overcome, and learned can become a source of teaching, guidance, and even provision. Many ignore that what hurt them yesterday might today be the key to someone else's healing and also open doors of provision. We live in a time where transforming experience into resources has never been more accessible. Ordinary people are creating courses, mentorships, ebooks, channels, simple content that teaches what they do well, from early childhood education to time management, recipes, parenting, crafts, or financial organization. The world no longer pays only for diplomas. It pays for practical and authentic solutions. And those who carry a real story, marked by faith and perseverance, have something no certification can provide: authority with truth. That builds trust. And trust, when combined with value, creates momentum. To educate is not just to teach, it's to multiply what God has given you. It's to leave marks beyond your time. It's to plant wisdom into lives that may never set foot in your home, but will be touched by what you decided to share. And here's a secret: when you teach with your heart, heaven responds with more revelation and provision. Marta, a single mother in Cartagena, Colombia, started recording simple cooking videos with her phone propped up on a stack of books. Within 6 months, her recipes were circulating throughout the country. Today, she sells courses, gets invited to events, and funds social projects with part of the profits, all because she decided to teach what she knew without waiting to be ready. Education in the kingdom isn't driven by perfection, but by intention. When you use your knowledge as seed, God transforms it into a harvest, not just financial, but spiritual, emotional, and generational. Because those who teach with purpose build generations without even realizing it. The most powerful impact doesn't come from perfectly spoken words, but from those that carry truth and intention. When knowledge is put at the service of others, it becomes more than information. It becomes an instrument of destiny. For a long time, many believed teaching was reserved for classroom teachers, with chalkboards and textbooks. But in the kingdom of God, teaching is serving. And everyone who serves faithfully begins to operate in a principle that activates movement, connection, and provision, multiplication through giving. Jesus didn't leave written manuals in his own hand. Instead, he transmitted values that crossed generations through words, gestures, and examples. He knew that when someone is touched by a living truth, that truth spreads. And if the Son of God used teaching as a tool for transformation, why do so many still insist on hiding what they know? Many say, "But what I know is basic." Yet what's basic to you might be the exact answer someone else is searching for. While you hesitate, people are looking for someone to speak about the very things you've already experienced. Your process, your pain, your breakthroughs, your everyday solutions, all of it holds value. Today, there are accessible paths for those who want to share their knowledge. A simple blog, a YouTube channel, an online course, even a social media account focused on a specific theme. The format isn't the most important thing. What matters is understanding that when you share what you have, you position yourself as a channel, and a channel never runs dry because it's constantly being filled. You don't have to wait for the perfect setup. Marta used books as a phone stand. Sifo recorded videos in his car. The beginning always comes with limitations, but it also carries a strength that big projects sometimes lose: the authenticity of someone doing the best they can with what they have. And heaven honors that, beyond the income that may come. Because yes, God uses wisdom as a means of provision, there's an even greater reward. Knowing that what you carry wasn't buried, but planted. Every person reached, every life touched, every testimony produced becomes part of your legacy. When you share with sincerity and purpose, you make room within yourself to receive more. It's a spiritual flow. Whoever gives in faith is never left empty. And the more you teach, the more you learn. The more you serve, the more you position yourself to receive the new from God. And there are ways to serve that, although simple in human eyes, carry a potential for multiplication that moves not only the economy, but also purpose. Among all the visible structures that support a city, one of the most essential is the one few truly value: transportation. It connects, carries, delivers, brings people together and sustains. And spiritually, it also represents something greater, the flow of provision where there's a willingness to move. Nahum 2.4 brings an image that seems merely descriptive, but hides a powerful principle. The chariots race madly in the streets. They rush to and fro in the squares. Movement, rhythm, circulation. Since the Old Testament, we've seen that where there's motion, there's economic life. Joseph in Egypt didn't just interpret dreams. He organized a logistics and storage system that sustained nations during an unprecedented crisis. It was strategy that positioned him. Today, the equivalent might be available to anyone with willingness and vision. A simple vehicle, a bicycle, even coordinating deliveries and local services. All of it can become a door to financial stability and a testimony of transformation. Esteban, for example, lived in a low-income neighborhood in Guatemala. He had only an old bicycle and a suffocating debt. Instead of selling the little he had left, he prayed and had an idea. Paint the bike, attach a box, and start delivering fresh juices prepared by his wife. In 2 years, with perseverance and faithfulness, Esteban not only paid off his debts, but also opened a small storefront. Today, he employs 2 young people and teaches principles of diligence to other residents in the area. Movement isn't just about physical displacement, it's also a mindset of service. Many think, but I don't have a car, and they forget that in the kingdom, creativity is also a resource. You can organize routes, coordinate deliveries, or operate in areas where there's movement, but a lack of structure. Those who understand circulation understand opportunity. It's not about luxury, it's about usefulness. A car sitting still costs money. An active vehicle becomes a blessing. A motorcycle can provide daily income. Even a simple pushcart can become a source of sustenance. In the kingdom, anything put in motion with purpose can become a channel of favor, because God does not breathe on what is stagnant. He breathes on what is surrendered to the flow. And where the flow is well managed, there is a constant harvest, even when the world is in crisis. Every constant harvest depends on well-tended ground. But even the most fertile soil can be compromised by silent elements that at first glance go unnoticed. What blocks progress is not always visible. Sometimes what paralyzes lies beneath the surface. Many sincere Christians are sowing with effort, dreaming with faith, but reaping little or nothing. That doesn't mean they're out of purpose, but that there are spiritual breaches that urgently need to be closed. There are subtle barriers, often disguised as spirituality, that sabotage the fruit before it even ripens. The first of these is irresponsible debt. Proverbs 22:7 is clear. The borrower is servant to the lender. In other words, out-of-control debt becomes a modern form of slavery. The problem is not just the loan itself, but the motivation behind it. Many buy to prove something, to keep up appearances, or to fill emotional voids, and that violates principles of stewardship and contentment. An anxious heart will always spend more than it can sustain. Another subtle obstacle is ego disguised as faith. There's a fine line between believing in the promise and using God as an excuse to avoid responsibility. People say God will provide, but avoid making practical decisions. They say the Lord is in control, while ignoring warnings and clear signs. True faith is active, not passive. It listens, discerns, and moves, even if in small steps. We also need to talk about lethargy disguised as spiritual waiting. Some use the phrase, "I'm waiting on God," to justify inertia. But the same God who teaches us to rest also calls us to work with diligence. Spiritual procrastination paralyzes more than doubt, because it hides behind beautiful words. But the kingdom has never grown in the comfort zone. It advances through practical obedience. And finally, there is the absence of generosity. Luke 6:38 says, "Give, and it will be given to you." Still, many want to reap without sowing, receive without sharing, achieve without contributing. Not out of malice, but due to a distorted view of scarcity. The fear of lack blocks the flow, and where the flow stops, the blessing stops circulating. God does not respond to hoarding, but to giving in faith. These four thieves, impulsive debt, spiritual pride, disguised inertia, and selfishness, masked as caution, are silent cracks in the structure of prosperity. Ignoring them is like building a beautiful house on sinking sand. Sooner or later, everything collapses. And what was planted with so much effort is lost for lack of vigilance. When the structure begins to collapse, it's not effort that's missing, but the discernment that was ignored. Many are watering the right field, but allowing invisible cracks to undermine everything from beneath. And when those flaws are corrected, what was once held back finally starts to flow. Some live as if heaven moves only by emotion, hoping that a spiritual touch will solve everything that was neglected in practice. But the kingdom doesn't operate by sentimentality. It responds to faithfulness with the principles that have already been revealed. The Bible is full of patterns and instructions that apply to real life, from how to manage resources to how to act in times of crisis. Prayer is essential, yes, but it was never meant to replace strategic action. The faith that bears fruit is the one expressed through consistent, organized, and intentional decisions. When Jesus multiplied the loaves, he didn't do it in chaos. First, he asked that the people be organized into groups. When Noah built the ark, he didn't act on impulse. He followed exact measurements given by God. When Joseph prepared Egypt for famine, he didn't wait for the crisis to arrive. He built silos, stored food, planned, and it was that structure that saved entire nations. These are not symbolic tales. They are spiritual strategies with practical impact. It's not enough to wish for a stable life. You must plant with purpose, maintain with vigilance, and build with consistency. Dreams are valuable, but without structure, they become mirages. What many call a miracle is actually the result of someone who combined faith with order, who prayed for direction, but also organized their routine, adjusted their habits, and was faithful in the small decisions. God blesses what is in motion, yes, but he also blesses what is well built. Because a project that is born, aligned with the principles of heaven, and is sustained by planning, has a solid foundation. And anything with a foundation stands firm. In the kingdom, nothing is random. There are principles for relationships, for growth, for finances, for calling. Ignoring them is choosing to walk blindly. Applying them is walking in authority. And those who understand that these principles are not burdens, but keys to access, begin to live not on occasional miracles, but on constant provision. The difference between trying and achieving, between praying and harvesting, lies in the willingness to align the spiritual with the practical, and it's at this point that results begin to be sustainable. Along this path, many truths have been revealed, not as distant theory, but as tools available right now. And if something inside you was activated, don't ignore it. Because there are moments when the Spirit moves not to stir emotions, but to bring direction. Maybe you saw yourself in some part, in the invisible blockages, in the lack of structure, in the neglected seed. Or maybe you're already in motion but need to reaffirm your commitment to the vision God planted inside you. Wherever you are on your journey, one thing is certain. No revealed principle returns void when it finds fertile ground. So if this message spoke to you, subscribe to the channel now, not just to follow new content, but as a public step of covenant with something greater. Every time you support this project, you strengthen the mission of bringing applied spiritual wisdom to thousands of people who, like you, are tired of prayers without direction and promises without foundation. Here you find truth with purpose, word with practice, faith with structure. And that's only possible because there are people committed to the advancement of the kingdom in every area of life, including finances. Share this message with your friends and family. There are people close to you going through hard times, praying for answers, but unaware that the manual is already open and that the models still work today. One truth can break chains. One principle can open doors. And a video like this might be the exact push someone needs to get out of stagnation. Don't keep to yourself what heaven has entrusted to you. The kingdom expands as truth is spread. And each share, each comment, each step of conscious action becomes part of this harvest. You don't need to wait for more signs. The path has already been shown. Now it's time to plant with intention, walk in faithfulness, and build with wisdom, because the codes of the kingdom have already been released, and they work for those who choose to apply them. May the Lord lead you with peace, discernment, and strength, not only to come out of lack, but to never return to it.